Again, is why it's being adopted all over the world in mass scale. It's why it's being put on the treasury of so many companies. You can't open up, X these days without seeing another company that's adopting, Bitcoin as a large part of its treasury. So it's coming, and it's coming very quickly. And then on the opposite side, on the utility side, there's no question that cryptocurrencies are going to revolutionize finance. They're going to speed up finance. They're going to make it more transparent, more, obviously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, faster. And I always use the example of the Swift system. I mean, I run a very big company, a lot of hotels, a lot of golf courses, commercial buildings, etc. Every week at 5 o'clock, we're waiting for a Swift wire transfer to come out, or we're trying to get out a wire transfer between, before the clock. How in the modern financial kind of, day that we have, or how in 2025 could that possibly be the case? And crypto solves all of these problems. And frankly, it's a wonderful thing for the United States. I mean, you look at the stablecoin business, look how much inward investment that's creating for the US. I mean, the vast majority of the dollars are coming from countries around the world that probably don't support their own currencies, that don't trust their own currencies, that want to be in the US dollar. There's a great case study where they launched a European stablecoin, and only half of 1% of Europeans would actually invest in a stablecoin that was based off of the euro. You know why? Every single one of them wanted the US dollar. And then you go around the world, you look at a lot of countries that are a hell of a lot less sophisticated or have, a less established markets than Europe does. They all want the US dollar, all of Asia, all of, Central and South America, all of Africa. That's a beautiful thing for the United States of America. That's going to bring in trillions and trillions of dollars. So I think across the board, America has to lead the way. I really think this revolution is going to speed up finance, make it more convenient, make it cheaper, make it more transparent, make it fairer across demographics. Because right now, believe me, the financial system benefits guys like me, who has zeros at the tail end of their net worth. A lot of them, if you don't, you have no advantage whatsoever. Crypto really levels that playing field in a massive way and solves a lot of problems that we have out there.
Well, to your point, that's why stablecoins have been called the killer app in this industry for so long. We just saw the biggest transaction when Stripe bought Bridge for $1.1 billion. And you mentioned that World Liberty Financial just announced that it would be launching its own dollar peg stablecoin last week. And my question to you is, what was the thinking behind that move? It's already a pretty crowded field. A lot of, major fintech players have launched their own stablecoins. Tether has, massive market dominance at this point. So where will World Liberty stand apart?
We're going to stand apart. You better believe we're going to stand apart. And American Bitcoin is going to stand apart as well. We're going to do it better, cheaper, faster, and we're going to do it with a lot of passion. That's what we do as a family. Everything we touch, turns gold. And, the community has embraced us in a beautiful way, a really, really beautiful way. And I fall in love with it. And again, I think these two projects are by far the most exciting projects in the world of cryptocurrency. They're so different, right? Because again, one's a kind of a store of value. It truly takes energy. So much of what I do is so physical in so many ways, but yet it's really kind of creating the greatest store of value. And the other, really sits on the edge of utility and improving people's lives and kind of, the financial system around the world. And again, I couldn't be more excited about this industry and the future of what we're doing.
There is crucial news swirling in the volatile trading world that Bitcoin holders and stock enthusiasts should pay close attention to. Bitcoin, BTC, has plummeted below $76,000 in the wake of President Donald Trump's bold move to slap an extra 50% tariff on China, triggering ripples across the crypto market. However, in an unexpected turn, Trump's tariffs could potentially pave the way for Bitcoin's rise amidst global economic turbulence. Stay tuned as we break down everything you need to know about cryptocurrency and the U.S. reciprocal tariffs. Welcome back to Investocracy Crypto.
So let's kick off with the macro situation here. Bitcoin off its all-time highs that we hit around the election of Donald Trump. How much is this about disappointment over Trump's policies so far, and how much of this is a macro situation? Chao, do you want to start?
Sure. I think before or around the time when Donald Trump was elected, the market, including both the institutions and the retailers, they all had very high expectations. But we all know that for a regulator or for a government policy, from an idea, from expression of an instance to action plans, it takes time. And given the volatile nature of the market, it's in some extent, very sentiment driven. When the regulation is not as clear as expected, or when it's not a strong support or actionable action list, the market will be a little bit disappointed in a way.
Richard?
So if you look at the long-term drivers, and if you ask anybody in the crypto industry, right, people will prefer the current administration compared to the last one, right? Last administration, you have Operation Choke Point 2.0 in progress. And then, you have regulation via enforcement, which is extremely tough for the industry to grow. And President Trump came in very pro-crypto, came in and introduced a strategic reserve for US and crypto. I think that's a very landmark issue on that front. And we're going to come, and he has appointed many smart administrators to the respective agencies. And he has the Senate and the House behind him with very pro-crypto legislators. So we are very bullish on that front. So long-term drivers are strong. But crypto market, as with any asset class, is not immune to macroeconomic situations, right? So what we believe we're seeing is a tactical retreat rather than a structural decline, right? If you remember 2022, Bitcoin, after several rounds of Fed rate hikes then, also went below 20,000, but it bounced back off up. So again, this is one of those situations.
With the Bitcoin reserve, Richard, was it what you expected? Because it was obviously just the seized Bitcoin rather than new purchases, which many in the market had hoped for.
Well, I think it's a good first step. I think the positivity coming out from that is much stronger, right? The messaging is, look, the largest government, the largest economy, the biggest capital market in the world is now holding Bitcoin as part of a reserve. It will cause many other governments to think through the issue, to sit up to say, hey, should we start doing allocation into crypto and Bitcoin, right? So many sovereign wealth funds are already starting to consider those issues. We were at Davos together, and Larry Finn spoke at that and said, in his conversation with all the big sovereign wealth funds, it's not a question of whether to allocate. It's whether allocating 2% or 5%, right? So we are having a lot of those important conversations now, and we are seeing, the long-term drivers are very, very strong.
Amid chaos and uncertainty, Binance CEO Richard Teng emerges as a beacon of hope, foreseeing Bitcoin's triumphant resurgence despite market tensions. In his recent tweet, Teng's optimism is infectious, echoing sentiments shared by crypto experts worldwide. Noteworthy among them is Bitwise's chief investment officer, Matt Hougan, who draws intriguing parallels between Trump's tariff maneuvers and Bitcoin's price dynamics. Hougan's musings hint at a possible shift from the dominance of the US dollar to a more diversified reserve system, with Bitcoin poised to claim a prominent seat at the table.
Paying attention to as the next catalyst for getting Bitcoin to maybe that next price level?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think it's going to be, there's a slow, steady drip. So unfortunately, that's not a one-off catalyst. But every time the Bitcoin 13F filings come out and they show that the scale of institutional adoption has gone from 14 to 18 to 29, it's going to 50 or 60. That's going to be another signpost that we're moving there. Every time you see another company say it's putting Bitcoin on its balance sheet, that's going to be another sort of pebble in the pond that lifts the tide. So there's going to be a lot of this sort of slow turn. I think if maybe there's, if we do see more sovereigns come out, I think maybe that could be the spark or catalyst, but I think it's more of a slow bull market. Actually, I wrote about this week in my CIO memo. I think the challenge the market is facing right now is all the short-term news is negative and the long-term news is incredibly positive.
That's so true.
And so it's so easy to focus on the short term. So I don't know if it's one catalyst. It's just like the tide slowly coming in on Bitcoin, which I think is what's happening.
How do you think about Bitcoin fitting into sort of this macro landscape that does feel uncertain for a lot of people, right? Inflation is still structurally higher than they want it to be. There have been some tremors in the bond market, nothing crazy. We see pullbacks, we see a lot of volatility. Some people think there's going to be some massive deflationary bust. Others think that liquidity is only going to go higher because they have to keep spending. How should people look at everything that's going on that feels like there's so much risk in general, and then position Bitcoin in that?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the market and say it's more volatile or open or uncertain than it has been in the past for exactly the reasons you called out. Yeah. Macro prognosticators are all over the map on
and
what they expect. Yeah, runaway inflation, runaway deflation. Where are you? I think where Bitcoin fits is you need a hedge. You need a thing that opts out of that system and that is steady, producing blocks all the time. Maybe it's not 100% of your portfolio, but if it's zero, then you're 100% exposed to this mess. And maybe people should think about having a little bit that's not exposed to that mess.
So Michael Saylor says, never sell your Bitcoin. I think Trump even came out and said that. Never sell your Bitcoin.
Adding fuel to the intensity, VanEck's head of digital assets research, Matthew Siegel, chimes in with a riveting forecast. Bitcoin could potentially usurp the dollar's safe haven status if federal policies align favorably. The stage is set for a captivating showdown as Bitcoin rides the waves of global economic upheaval, thrilling investors with the promise of unprecedented growth. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
How does it not work? That's what everyone wants to know, right? Obviously, it's been working. All of these Bitcoin treasury strategies. What is the scenario where it doesn't work? What is the doomsday scenario? What do you guys see as the biggest risk or the biggest threat?
I think you obviously see strategy, Metaplanet, Semler working. You see some of the others kind of, it's so early, but they're kind of, so I think it's just too early. And if somebody collateralizes their Bitcoin, if they take on too much leverage, I just think that's what I see.
Yeah, it's going to be if companies really try to compete aggressively on the leverage side of the house. What you watch with what Strategy's been doing and with what the other ones that have entered have done is they've kept really strong control over their leverage ratios. So you've never really seen them get into this scenario where they're overly leveraged in a risky position. And a lot of people think about liquidation points when it comes to companies like Strategy, but because this is non-recourse debt, those aren't really a thing. So everyone's looking for what's the Bitcoin price where this all falls apart. It really doesn't exist right now.
Describe why having non-recourse debt is so important for an asset underlying that is so volatile.
Yeah, and this one was really important to me. My early career was in commercial banking during the financial crisis, and I was in the troubled loans group. I was doing all the credit underwriting there. So the first thing I saw when they first did have secured debt was that made me really nervous because it can take some of your own destiny out of your hands. And particularly when you're tying your company to a really volatile asset like Bitcoin, if you've got loan to value or you've got debt service coverage covenants in that loan, you can get into a point where if Bitcoin becomes volatile enough and you get into one of these major drawdowns, it could cause a liquidation just on the value of the asset decreasing. So getting into non-recourse where you don't have any ties to a loan to value really frees you up and takes a lot of that risk out of the equation.
You guys got anything to add?
I think something with Bitcoin would have to break in order for these at least Strategy with how they're managing their asset and their risk profile of their company. I think it would have to be something with Bitcoin would have to break.
All right. What happens if they sell? Right? All these companies are built on the idea that they're never going to sell their Bitcoin. What happens if Metaplanet goes out and Simon tomorrow says, I want to or I have to sell? If I have a convert and everyone says, hey, look, I want to actually get paid back versus convert into equity, does that break this kind of like soft, kind of pact that people have with their shareholders? And all of a sudden that leads to a different behavior change?
I think there's two scenarios. You saw back at the beginning where Saylor actually sold some for tax loss harvesting something at the end of the year. But he also bought a bunch at the same time, and there was a little bit of noise, but it was largely, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. But if a company actually sells, then they're done, as far as the strategy and people rallying around them.
As we wait to see what the future holds, one thing is clear. Bitcoin's destiny hangs in the balance as world events unfold. Amidst the turbulence, the stage is being set for a potential stock market revolution. Today, Bitcoin, although still down, is slowly surging. Therefore, seize this moment to contemplate the boundless possibilities that Bitcoin's journey may unveil. Do you agree with these predictions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And finally, if you would like to know more about cryptocurrencies or specifically Bitcoin, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.